So, Ellen, thank you for joining me today on the Mark and Me podcast.
I am honored. Thank you so much for having me.
What I love to do with every guest that comes on, and we've now gone over 300 episodes, but what I love to do is find out basically by taking you right back to the very start. So, when you first were a kid, were there certain TVs, shows, or films that you absolutely loved that made you want to get into the world of acting?
I love this question. It's funny for me because I actually grew up without a television, and both of my parents are college professors. They're academics,
Yeah.
and so that was why they were staunchly anti-television. And nevertheless, I was allowed to watch TV at friends' houses. I was allowed to watch movies and so on, and we did go out to see movies as a family. But because of that, I was very sensitive to things that I saw. So a lot of the early movies that I saw completely terrified me because I think I just wasn't as used to seeing it in my own house every single day. However, I think that probably my first favorite movie that I saw was, and this just shows you how I've been a weirdo my whole life,
I'm excited now.
was Kenneth Branagh's Henry V.
Wow, I
I
was
was
not
like,
expecting that.
yeah, probably not a lot of people's answer. I was like 5 or 6.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was pretty young, but my parents, being college professors, took me to see Kenneth Branagh's Henry V, and I loved it so much. I made them take me back 5 times. I loved it. I could not get enough. I was just
Five
immediately like,
times.
yes, I was immediately like, this is my stuff. And, I think they had taken me to see live productions of Shakespeare previously. I remember having already seen a production of Twelfth Night by that time. So obviously at some point they were like, we think our child can enjoy Shakespeare, but they were right. And so yeah, when they took me to see that movie, they had some sense that though being I think 5 or 6 years old, was going to enjoy Shakespeare. But I think I loved everything about it. And what's sort of funny for me reflecting on it is when I think about how completely terrified I was by other movies that I saw at that time that like were more meant for children, like completely terrified by The Little Mermaid, horrified, had to leave the
Wow.
theater. Completely terrified by Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
That was one of
And
my first films I saw at the cinema. I couldn't believe the mix of animation with actual full motion. It blew my mind.
yeah, no, I mean, it's very cool, but also like the dip was very scary to me. And
Those
uh,
eyes.
yeah, yeah, very scary. And I saw The Princess Bride and was also very terrified by the scene where they like suck all the life out of him. But Henry V, I was like, this is fine. I'm
Yep.
into this. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it is. I loved it. I loved it so much. I think I just immediately, though I was young, I just really loved the language, you know. I
I
just
only
find
literally
great joy in
last
that.
week went to in Stratford over here in the UK, Stratford upon Avon. There's the RSC, and I went to see
Mm-hmm.
Macbeth, and
Mm.
it blew my mind. And I'm going to the Globe in 2 weeks to watch it in London, so I can't wait.
Oh, wonderful. Is it this? You're seeing also the Scottish play in
Yes.
London, or is it? Okay, great. So you can do a compare and contrast.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Personally, I have preferred the things that I have seen at the Globe to the things that I have seen at the RSC, but obviously they're both really excellent.
Yeah, they're just amazing, and I haven't been a massive fan all my life. As in, not that I didn't like it, as in I've only just started getting into it. But I was probably just being a bit of a snob and being like, "Oh, I don't want to go to the theatre. It's not for me. I'd rather go to a gig, or I'd rather go to the cinema." And I went in and I was like, "Oh my God, this is magical!" And then I was just like, I didn't take my eyes off the cast for like 2.5 hours, and I was like, "This is the best thing ever." So now I'm like, I want to go to all the shows.
Yeah. Oh, that's so exciting.
Yeah, it is. It's a good time, and it's not too far away. It's like an hour and a half to get to the RSC, and it is beautiful because when you're walking around as well, obviously all the grounds and the surrounding areas all for Shakespeare. So it's just like you feel like as soon as you get there, you're gonna like be part of something special that day.
Yeah, Stratford is really wonderful. And I think one of the things that's so great about Shakespeare as theater specifically is that there's this really relationship between the actors and the audience
Yeah.
because the actors are talking directly to the audience. And so, though obviously I love Kenneth Branagh as Henry V, I feel like it is a the plays are really meant to be in when we're all in a room together,
Yeah.
when it's sort of we're in relation to the space together as a community watching the thing.
It's
So
amazing because like there's moments in the show I swear I was like I'm sure Macbeth is looking at me in the eye like there's moments they just felt that connection or where they would shout and point and I was like God I really feel like immersed in this. It's there's nothing else like it is there because it's live, it's in front of you and it just it's magical. That's the word.
Yeah, I studied for a couple of summers at Shakespeare and Company in Western Massachusetts. And I remember this very, I mean, for me, life-changing performance by this actor named Dan McCleary, who was playing Macbeth. And so, I was 18 or 19 years old and had done a decent amount of, Shakespeare for young people up until that point in my life. But there was something so incredibly conversational about the way that he used Shakespeare's text that it made me realize, oh, this is why it's a tragedy. Like, it's a tragedy if Macbeth is just talking to you and seems like your next door neighbor, and you feel like you recognize yourself in him and you feel like you actually have a relationship with him. And then you see this, sort of terrible downfall and spiral into madness. You see yourself sort of lose the person that you felt like you knew. And I remember because I watched that studying there, I went to that performance a number of times, and he was so conversational that there was this brilliant moment when Macbeth has this line after one of the later witches scenes, uh, that's just where did they go? And he was so conversational and he directed it so much towards the audience that a little kid in the audience just thought like the actor lost the other actors, and the little kid called out like they went that way, and I was
That's
like, yes,
amazing.
that's what I want, like that's what theater is supposed to be. Yeah, it was incredible.
That's awesome. So after obviously starting at such a young age, seeing these incredible productions, seeing these stage performances, and some great films that scared the hell out of you, um, was it kind of your vision and your parents, were they supportive in the way that you wanted to go down the career of getting into the film industry and acting, or were they like, look, we really need you to get a real job and then you can do the acting as well, but let's try and get a backup, or were they fully kind of in support and believed in you?
I mean, I think that they were in sort of slightly in between those two poles, I guess. I think supportive, certainly, so just to clarify, my father is a professor of folklore and my mother is an art historian. So both of them study art. And so both of them feel very strongly the value of art to society and, to humanity. And I think that also growing up with two parents who were studying artists, though visual artists generally, I think it gave me a false impression of like how important art was just to people generally. I was like, oh yeah, artists are the most important people. Um, but I think that because they're both academics, they're just, I think, aware of how hard life is as an actor.
Yeah.
And I think a little nervous about my life sort of setting off as an actor. And so though I think they are very supportive, when I was looking at going to university, they were like, we do not want you to go to a theater program. We require of you that if we are going to help pay for your education, that it is going to be something else. So I have an English major, very useful. And actually, I'm incredibly grateful for it, partly because I feel, at least for myself, that being a writer is as important to my life as being an actor. And I think without having been an English major, without having had professors that really inspired me to love literature as much as I have always loved being an actor and the theater and film and TV, I'm not sure that I would be in that place, and I am grateful that I am in that place. So I never had any plans to be anything other than an actor with an English major. But I'm actually very grateful at this point in my life that my parents had that requirement of me.
Was there a moment in your career, and I know obviously you've still got many years ahead, but was there a moment that it felt like a turning point? So there's a number of roles you've done within the TV and film industry, but was there a moment that it felt like you kind of made it and it felt like, okay, I can see a lot more opportunities coming my way. My agent's busier. I'm getting a lot more calls. It just felt like, okay, this is serious now. I really do feel like I'm going to be doing this for the long run.
Mm, that's a wonderful question. Because I think in some ways I'm like, I'm still waiting for that turning point. But no, I think that that would be very unfair and ungrateful for the wonderful career that I've been lucky to have so far to say that. I mean, I think having done so much theater, I did struggle to get into television and film a little bit in New York, even though I lived in Boston. I went to school in Boston, and I stayed there for a few years working as an actor, which was a wonderful choice that I made because it's a very warm community there, and like it was a wonderful way to kind of start out my career. So, I mean, right out of school, I had actually booked a couple of TV things in Boston, and so despite growing up without a television. And I think, at that point in my career, I was like, I just, want to do Shakespeare and I want to do plays and so on. I found that I really loved it. I really loved the scale of it and the immediacy of it and the sort of like improvisatory. Maybe that's the wrong word. The spontaneity that is so
Yeah.
important in TV and film. I really liked that. And so I then thought, I love theater, but I would really like to do more of this. And I moved to New York and was still doing a bunch of theater and had a kind of a hard time breaking in that regard. But because certainly something that is perhaps true of humans in general, but certainly true in my experience of a career as an actor is that once you do something, people are like, that's what you are, right? So if you
It's
have done
so
a bunch of
true.
theater, people are like, you're a theater actor. There's no way that you could like do anything else, really, until you are a very famous person, and then they are interested in your transformation. But that is, of course, very much the case about like the kinds of roles that you get offered. People will see you do one thing, and they're like, "Oh, well, but that's who you are, so we'll just have you do that thing."
For the rest of your
So,
life, every single day. That's it.
exactly. Yes. So in an attempt to answer your question, I think that I had gotten a few television roles, but sort of my, I guess, like breakthrough television role potentially was this mini series called The Slap. And it wasn't even a breakthrough so much in terms of because it was not it wasn't like a hit show that everybody saw and then everybody knew me from that show so much as that was the first show I had a large recurring character on that show, and I actually felt like I was part of the show. I actually felt like, all of the other actors on that show, incredible actors, were very warm and welcoming to me and just treated me like one of their peers. And so I think that that made me feel like I was one of their peers instead of, if you're doing just a day on a television show, or you're just a guest star on sort of like one episode,
Yeah.
very often you just sort of don't integrate into the company of the actors, and that's fine. It's just that's kind of the nature of the job, right? Is that you're just sort of there and you do your job and then you go home. Because you don't
You're not there for the
try.
long run, are you? It's literally you have a purpose and a job to do. You tick that box and you go. Where if you're on 4 or 5 episodes or something, you're going to be around the same people morning, day, and night for a few days, so you can start having conversations and then invest in your time.
Yeah, but I will also say everybody on that show was incredibly welcoming of me from my first episode. I think I've been on some other shows where sort of like the first episode, oh, but then people see that I've come back for like the second or third episode and we start talking more. But they were just, they were very kind and they made me feel very welcome. And that was, I don't want to speak ill of any of the other previous experiences that I've had, because I think when you're a day player, I have a very much like do not speak unless spoken to kind of an attitude, you know, like if I'm there with very famous actors, I'm not going to like try to be friends with them. They're here to, you
Yeah.
know,
Hey,
they've
buddy,
got
how's it going? Do you want a Coke? Like, no, just leave me alone.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And like honestly, from my very first television experience, which was on a show called Brotherhood, I there were actors who were incredibly kind to me. So I think in some ways, perhaps getting that my sort of first large television episode, that was that episode of Brotherhood, I think also really changed my life in terms of, you know, I was right out of school and all I had was an English major, and I didn't have this sense of like, am I actually going to be able to do this, or am I just going to try this for a few years and never get a job and then like figure out something else to do with my life? But yeah, I think I'll sort of like point out those two things, and you know, I remain very grateful to John Robin Bates, who was the writer of that series, The Slap, for casting me
But
in that show.
it was only a couple of years later after the slap that you did The Sinner, and
Hmm.
I'm a huge fan of TV. I spend obviously most of my life watching really good shows, but I invested so much time in The Sinner because it kind of just gripped me straight away. I thought it was one of the best first opening episodes of any TV, and it was just so consistent. Each week it delivered. I try and binge watch, but then I also think at the same time I don't want it to be all over too quickly. So I kind of like, not more episodes tonight. I'll wait. And with The Sinner, it was always left me like I need to push the play button and watch one more now because it's that good. But you must have been blown away to be involved in such an iconic TV show that people still talk about now. You know, it is one of the best TV shows I think in the last 10 years.
I really was. Oh my goodness, it was incredible. I the first season of that show is so stunning. I feel like Jessica Biel gives one of my favorite television performances that I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's
I
mind
just
blowing.
think she is mind blowing. She's incredible, and Bill Pullman is so wonderful in every single season of the show. It's just, I always feel like watching him listen is like drinking a glass of water. It's just so satisfying. So, yeah, I think it was the first season of that show was so gripping. Again, incredibly addictive to watch,
Yeah.
and so I felt incredibly lucky to get to be a part of the second season, which I think was also just like a really wonderful story, and you know, to get to work with actors like Carrie Coon and Hannah Gross, it was really a wonderful experience. And I think, you know, that was sort of a moment in my life where I also had this sense of like, is my career kind of going up to the next level, because I had just had, prior to that, a really wonderful recurring character on Homeland,
Yeah.
which I also had a
The
wonderful
same year. How
experience
good
with.
is that?
It was the
2018
same
was
year.
the year.
Yeah, yeah, it was great, and I was definitely like, yay, like my career's on the up and up. But you know, uh, there's this. I'm a big baseball person, and there's this saying, prospect growth isn't linear when you're talking about a baseball player, and I always like say that to myself about an artistic career as well. Like prospect growth isn't linear.
That's fair.
So yeah, yeah. But yeah, you know, in some ways the pandemic has really disrupted a lot of things, just in terms of the way that the industry works,
Yeah.
and that's, you know, that's fine. But yeah, that was a really incredible year to get to play really two different characters, as much as I was whinging earlier about, you know, just being one thing and then people just thinking that that's the one thing you can do. It was
But
really
it's
fun
awesome
to.
because like that was two of the most talked about TV shows. Like you know, there's stuff like Lost and Heroes and all these great shows we talk about like Breaking Bad. But in 2018, those two shows were everywhere. Everywhere I looked, they're advertised, and I was like, that must be pretty awesome to look at your CV and your IMDb and be like, yeah, that was the year.
It was incredible. Yeah. Yeah. It was one of the most fun years of my life, for sure.
That's awesome. And at the moment, obviously, you're promoting Herd. Now, how did this role actually come about for you?
I just got an appointment for it,
Yep.
from my agents to audition for it. And when I read the script, I was just immediately so in love with it. I think, one of the things that I responded to very strongly was that I felt like I read it in early 2021.
Yeah.
I felt like it had clearly been written in 2020, even though it is not about 2020, which I feel like is exactly the kind of thing that we need right now to process this kind of societal trauma that we all went through, but nobody wants to talk about. And like, I don't want to see a movie about COVID. Nobody wants to see a movie about COVID. But in terms of sort of what the pandemic did to our society and kind of like what that says about humanity, I think that that's what this film is looking at. And yeah, I just thought it was incredible. And then the other thing was that I just responded very strongly to the character of Jamie Miller. And I just felt like I immediately knew who she was and where she kind of resided inside of me. And I had very clearly this thought that I've repeated a few times, but I thought I would die to do this movie as long as I can do the movie first and then die afterwards. So
So when you met with Stephen Pierce, the director, and obviously you're talking about a zombie outbreak film, are you a fan of horror and the kind of zombie kind of genre, or were you then like, I'm going to go and do some studying and I'm going to go and watch stuff like Dawn of the Dead and all these classic horrors, or were they already familiar and in your world?
again, I'm going to say sort of somewhere in the middle. So I think because I grew up without a television, I grew up, I talked about how terrified I was by like children's movies. Things that are scary in movies continued to be scary for me. And so for a number of years, I kind of joked like, well, I should really still do horror movies because the things that are scary are like more potent to me. I am very scared by horror movies. But I've done 4 horror movies at this point, and I have become more of a student of the genre. And while I will say that every single kind of horror movie is not for me, I do really like horror movies at this point, particularly if they are thoughtful, if they are movies that have something to say about the human condition. And so one of the things that I think is really, for me, a virtue of the zombie world of Herd is that they are virus-based zombies,
Yeah.
rather than being undead zombies, and so that makes it a little bit more plausible. And the films that or the television shows that I like most in the zombie world um, are the ones like the 28 Days Later films.
Oh, what a classic.
Oh my gosh, which are so good. Both of them are so good. And I had actually already seen one of them, and I rewatched both of them before shooting this film. And unfortunately, this has come out after we shot this movie, but the television series The Last of Us, I think, is incredible. And yeah, I'm a huge fan of that show because I think, again, it is very much about like, what is this circumstance doing to what it means to be a human? And yeah, and I think that's very much the case for Herd as well.
So are there other horrors that you've discovered because now the genre's in your life? You've done 4 horrors that you talked then about, not all horrors for you, but are there some classics that you've just absolutely fallen in love with? Because I could talk horror all day long.
Oh, that's a wonderful question. I mean, I don't know if this is a classic or not, but I am a big fan of the Babadook.
Yes,
Um,
no,
yeah.
the kid's voice was annoying. I don't know why he really grated on me, and I was like, "Your scream!" And I know he's meant to be, and he's meant to be this evil kid that's like being possessed, but the way he was like, "Mommy, mommy," and I was like, "Oh, like it's really winding me up that it took me away from the film." I know that's bad, but I just got wound up with him.
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel like horror movies exist to wind you up,
Yeah,
however
it
that
did
might
its
be.
job, but yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't have that same response, but I think that it's an understandable response to have. Yeah, I sort of feel like that the monster as a metaphor for grief is
yeah.
makes the film really really interesting. Um, and I'm trying to think, when so the first horror movie that I shot was called Trick, and I had asked the director to give me a sort of a watching assignment list, and I saw um, Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Yeah, that's like like in the 70s, wasn't it? It might be before
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah, it's but like some things from that film have really stuck with me. I was trying to think about things that are super classic. I think my favorite thing that he had me watch for that, just not vis-a-vis the film that then we were going to shoot, but just the thing that I liked the most was the movie Zodiac, which I thought was just incredible.
Yeah.
Which I feel like some people might sort of qualify as horror and some people might not. Um, yeah, I'm I'm sorry to not have like a sort of fuller
You don't need
answer
to. I
for
mean,
you.
Zodiac's
Yeah,
an absolute masterpiece and some of the
incredible.
best writing and directing I've ever seen. And when you've got David Fincher, he is just an absolute genius. Like, I think he's one of the best in the whole world.
I wouldn't disagree with you. Yeah, yeah, he's absolutely incredible. Yeah.
So now that Herd's out there and people can go and see this, what's your kind of vision for the next kind of 6 months to 12 months? Because obviously with the writers' strikes and everything slowing down, do you feel like getting back into writing more, or are you still wanting to do as much acting work as you can? Or have you ever thought of going on the other side of the camera and directing? Is that a vision you see yourself maybe doing one day in life?
Yeah, that's a another really excellent question. Yes, obviously things have been slower for a while with the writer's strike, and I also think with the studios being aware that we were sort of probably going to head into a couple of strikes. Production was down really in the last year before the strike. So obviously, like I love acting very much. It brings me so much joy, and so I would love to get the chance to hop back in, having been on this kind of like strike related hiatus. Um, but also, I have been writing more. It's always been a part of my life, but honestly, in the shutdown part of the pandemic, was when I was basically able to make it more a central part of my life.
Yeah.
Prior to that, I had always had this goal of I want to try to write at least a little bit 5 days every week. But that was always so hard to make that happen. And we're sort of heading back into a world in which that is harder to make it happen. However, I feel like now what I have behind me is having spent so many days in which that has been my main focus is writing. So, certainly I've been writing a lot more during the strike and working on a number of projects. I have a com- completed draft of a novel and a completed draft of a couple of the first two in a trilogy series, and also a completed screenplay draft. I'm
Do you
working on
ever
a television
sleep? That's
series.
a lot of writing.
It's a lot of writing. Yeah,
Yeah.
I really love it. So I do sleep. I mean, I've some of these projects I've been working on, since like
Yes.
2019. So, that's with the sort of trilogy. I've been working on that project. So, in answer to your question, I have directed some for theater, and I would love to direct for the camera as well. I do have a sense of that I know there would be a learning curve there. There are certainly things that I do know from the number of television shows and movies that I've been in terms of in terms of the way that things cut together, and in terms of the way that shots are lined up and so on. But that I know I need to have like a really good DP who is okay with
Yeah.
me not knowing a lot about that side of things. I do feel like obviously the talking to actors part would be the easiest part for me, but that there's so much more that is involved in being the director of something that is for the camera, in some ways than directing something for theater. There are other elements, that you need to talk to your design team about or design yourself or whatever it is. But like most of your job is talking to actors. So that is certainly something that I would love. But I think something that I am more actively working towards is being the writer that is on that side of the camera, than the director.
And are there, obviously, when everyone gets into a business that they want to work within, are there certain directors or other actors that you just dream to work with? And I know everyone would love to work with all the big names, but are there certain people that you're such a fan of their work, it would feel like a milestone for you to tick that off on a list and say, yes, I finally got to work with that person?
Oh my goodness.
There might be
This is
100 names you've got in your
there's
head, but
there are like 100 names. Yeah. Well, my favorite actor in the world is Mark Rylance. Um,
just an
I
absolute genius.
I think he's so so incredible. Talking about life-changing performances, when I was at Oxford, I saw him at the Globe playing Olivia in Twelfth Night, and like just again completely changed my life. Um, and I think that his charisma is so interesting, and his presence is so completely magnetic, and I think it is comes from this fact that he is just so astonishingly present and actually doesn't like put anything else on top of that. It's incredible. So he's the first person that springs to mind. When Heard was premiering in London, we actually went to go see him in Dr. Semmelweis, because I was just like, look, if I can see Mark Rylance in anything, then that is always my choice.
Was that
Um,
during Fright Fest just a couple of weeks ago?
yes,
I was there,
yes,
but I couldn't get to see many of the screenings because I was just at different events during the whole time. But it was just such an amazing event. Like so many horror fans, everyone just celebrating together. There didn't seem to be a boundary between the stars and the fans, and it just felt like a really nice big family celebrating horror. It was amazing.
it was incredible.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, major respect to the people who hold that event, because yeah, I found it to be far more of just like a big, warm, happy family than
Yeah, it
other
really
film
was lovely.
festivals that
I'm
I've
like, I
been to.
can't wait to go back next year. I'm like, this is great.
Yeah, yeah,
So you got Mark
yeah.
Rylance, that's a hell of a name to go for. And then is there anyone else?
I would, I mean, again, there's a million people that I'm going to pick, but out of everybody, I would love to work with Martin McDonagh.
Wow.
Yes, yes, I I really love all of his plays and his movies, and I love the way in which the human condition then gets sort of blown up, right? Like I kind of like the extremity of I mean, I'm thinking specifically of so his last film, The Banshees of Inisherin. I felt as I was watching the beginning of it, I was like, I feel uncomfortably seen. I feel like both sides of myself are represented in this friendship, and
What a film that was, like
so
so
incredible,
good, just unbelievable.
astonishing. But then what I appreciate about the McDonagh style is again the extremity of it, and the way that it is extrapolated to this place where you're like, no, just stop. That I kind of like when things take a sort of a McDonagh turn,
Yeah.
and yeah, and I sort
Suddenly
of
go where you could never ever predict. And then the moment he's starting to
exactly.
chop his own fingers off, I'm like, I didn't see this coming at the nice, beautiful landscape shots of parts of Ireland, and now he's throwing it at the door. I'm like, this was never going to be on the cards. But of course, with this director, it was on the cards the whole time.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's just it's so interesting the way that like intense realism kind of butts
That's exactly
against
it. Yeah.
otherworldly violence in his work. And so, I mean, I think the part of me that is a huge fan of that kind of like, oh my God, it's so messed up, is the part of me that is a fan of a certain kind of horror as well. That is very appealing to me. So yes,
Yeah, that
that
and
will be
Three Billboards have been some of the best films I've seen recently. Just
so
incredible. In
incredible.
Bruges, like just so good. Like
They're
what
all
a
amazing.
CV. What an incredible career.
Yeah, and I mean every single one of his plays. I've never done one of his plays either. I would just love to do one of his plays. I'd love to like work with him as a writer, but
If
if
I
I
ever
can
get him
pick
on the podcast, I'm going to say, listen back to this episode
Yes, if I can pick one actor and one director, I guess those are
There
the
you go.
first ones that came to my head. Yes.
What I do on this podcast, and I do it on every episode, and it's my final question for you today, is every guest that gets to come on the podcast gets to choose the final song that's played. So after we've edited all this episode and the world gets to listen to us chat, as it finishes, every single guest gets to choose a piece of music or a song or a band that they love. And what's really good is I've never had any crossover, so someone always chooses something different. But is there a song or a piece of music that you just love that when I asked the question came to your heart and soul above any other one that you would love to be played out on today? Talk
Uh,
about putting you on the spot.
yes, exactly. No, I love this question. I love it so much. But yes, it's the world of songs that I love that are clamoring at me right now. Like, pick me. I am going to choose "Move On Up" by Curtis Mayfield.
God, I love that song. Plus, it's really long. There's like a 9 minute version
The
that's the full
9 minute
extent.
version is
Yeah,
so great. I mean, the like
we'll
3 minute
we'll put the
version is
9 minute one
also.
on because I think every artist should be able to choose the song how they listen to it, and that is the one.
Yeah, it's so good. I love a song that like is in a minor key or has minor key elements but is up tempo, and
Yeah,
I feel like the song has so much about like life is hard but we make it better. That I feel like I need that energy in my life almost every single day, and I want to bless everybody else with that energy as well.
it's an awesome song. It should be the one that opens an episode like da, 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 da. Instantly. You can't be like,
Da, da,
oh,
da,
well, this is going to be a
da,
terrible episode.
da,
Like you
da,
just
da, da.
instantly want to dance.
Yes,
You want to
yes.
sing along, and then there's like a 3.5 minute sort of instrumental bit on that extended version that just goes off on one. There's loads of like hand drums and stuff going on and percussion, and I'm just like, this is awesome. Like it's such a great tune, and his voice is just like I could
He's
listen to it all
wonderful.
day. Yeah,
Yeah, it's one of my all-time favorite songs. And you're right to sort of talk about the instrumentation because all of the musicians that he's working with are just so incredible.
that's a hell of a choice, and no one's picked it yet. Even after we've done 300 episodes, I've had quite a few people recently pick the Beach Boys for some reason. They must
Hmm.
be doing something right because a lot of guests are choosing the Beach Boys, but not the same song. But finally, Curtis Mayfield comes on the podcast.
Ah, I'm so glad that I was able to make that happen. The Beach Boys are wonderful. Like,
They are,
yeah,
but
but
something different is always good. And what will happen now is I'll go and edit the episode. I'll listen to Curtis Mayfield. I'll then leave Spotify playing. It'll play loads of Curtis Mayfield, and I'll discover loads of songs I've not heard by him before. And then probably spend the next 2 or 3 weeks just listening to him.
well, you're welcome.
Yeah, I owe you. But what I will
Yeah,
say
he's so
is,
great.
genuinely, I feel like I could talk for you for hours. And what I normally do on the podcast is I get a guest on, kind of break the ice, get to know each other, and then come back on and we can talk about other stuff. And I really believe that, there's a door always open for you. And if you'd like to come back on at any point, we can just sit and talk about any different genre or any different music or just stuff in life. And I feel like we've just scraped the surface today, and there's so much more we can discuss.
Well, I mean, I at least I came out of the gate saying that I talk too much. I also feel like I could talk to you for a very long time. Um, and I really appreciate that. I would absolutely love to come back on. I think you are an excellent interviewer.
That's very kind.
I think you're
I
like
just leave it
really,
nice and relaxed and nice and chilled, and I don't try and get like a headline or try and worm my way in to try and ask a question that someone feels uncomfortable. I like it that it feels like, I don't know, I've just met you and we're having a drink at a table like a coffee and we're just chatting. And if that works and it's nice and relaxed for you and for me, and I've enjoyed it and you're enjoying it, then don't change it.
yeah, no, but I respect how good you are at this thing that you do as a person who also like, does a couple podcasts. Like it's hard. It's harder than people think it is.
It is, and
And
I try and not change for anybody. So even though I've had Anthony Hopkins, who's one of the greatest actors in the
yeah.
world, I've had Kevin Smith as a director, who's one of my idols. I've never changed. I've always just been me. I've never kind of, tried to be someone different, and people like that, and that's why it's done so well. So, yeah, you are genuinely hand on heart more than welcome. And let's not leave it too long because I said this to some people, and people like Neil Blomkamp, the film director, and Neil Marshall. They've been on 4 times now, so there's always something to talk about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would really love that. I would really love that.
Amazing. Thank
Yeah,
you so much for your time today. It honestly means the world to me for coming on. I've loved all your work. I've loved the film as well. I've been sent an advanced screener, so I've been able to see it, and I thought it was just great. And I really feel like the director's got a great career ahead of him.
I
And
think so too.
I'm really excited. I wish I'd seen it on the big screen at the Fright Fest, but you have to be in 100 places at once, so it's just unfortunate.
Yeah, completely understandable. It was pretty great. I mean, to see it on the IMAX screen, it was pretty incredible
Yeah,
for
how
us.
cool is that?
Yeah, yeah, it was amazing. So thank you so much for having
No,
me
it's
on
a
your
pleasure.
podcast. Yeah,
What I'll
I think
do,
you're very
I'll
gifted. Great. Yeah, we'll do it.
awesome,
You know what? I look forward to the next time I get to talk to you.
awesome. Have a great rest of the day, and I will
You too.
connect with you very soon.
All right. Thanks,
Take care
Mark.
now. Bye
You
now.
too.